Ryan, John, and Lou, thank you. And Jennifer, I cannot help but swell with pride remembering you up here so terrified. And now you are rocking your power. And I am so proud of you. Yes. Which only goes to prove that if you come to this center long enough and you do what we tell you to do, you will heal anything and be able to be the person that you were meant to be. You can't help it. It's an energy. It's a connection. It inspires. It uplifts. It connects. It heals. We just keep doing that over and over and over again. So I want to start off with a disclaimer. I came up with this phrase, how to interpret anything, when I was putting my metaphysical interpretation of the Bible class together, because when we start interpreting the Bible, we can look at it many different ways, and really it only means what we make it mean anyway. So remember in life, it only means what you make it mean. It's only real if you make it real. You can do anything and have your life mean anything that you want. I've been in counseling so many decades on both sides of the couch, yes. But I've seen people take things that were very insignificant and turn them into giant obstacles in life. And I've seen people take giant obstacles in life and turn them into nothing. Like Jen Oman, making medical history. She is the multiple sclerosis spokesperson around the country. They've made videos about her to say you can do anything in life if you set your mind to it, if you commit to it, if you decide to it. So it only means what you make it mean. And in looking at these different tools that we have for interpreting the Bible, now I said the word, breathe. I know we've had Bible a lot lately, and we don't usually do Bible. So we've had Bible 3 times now in 5 weeks. That's a lot of Bible. Those of you who love the Bible, great. Those of you who don't, breathe. We're going to have fun this morning. And you're going to learn how to interpret your dreams, your neighbor's dog, your ideas about life, your fantasies. You can interpret anything when you learn how to interpret things. So if you like Bible, come to my class tomorrow night. We're going to have a lot of fun. No books, no homework, just coming and picking stories apart and seeing what they mean to us. But because I love this class, it was the first talk I ever gave in ministerial school. I love this class. I love this idea that I can take something that for so many years was meant or used, not meant, but used to hurt me. And I can take it and go, no, that's not what they meant at all. Because you're just making it mean what you think it means. And when people say, Jesus meant this, no, he didn't. If he had meant that, perhaps he would have said it. So you can't go to somebody meant this when they said that, so that fosters the person saying that their position about what I should be doing or not doing. No. That's all a crock. So when we look at stories, we can look at certain things. And there are certain keys to interpretation of anything that you are interpreting. Have you ever noticed that in some of your dreams, we'll just pick dreams because we'll go a little bit into Jungian analysis. Have you ever noticed in some of your dreams you're either flying? Does anybody have flying dreams? Isn't that wonderful? Flying dreams, or you're up on a mountaintop and the sun is shining and the wind is through your hair and everything is great. Or maybe a dream when you're down in the pits and it's dark and maybe something is chasing you. Do you ever have any of those dreams? Am I the only one? You can look at these differences. One, you're up high. You're at a higher state of consciousness. Everything is going great. The sun is shining. The wind is blowing. Other ones where you're flying, you're free. You've transcended physical limitations. And other ones, you're down low. Down low in the level of fear and anxiety Do you ever wake up from those dreams? Bum, 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 bum. That's because it's a lower state of consciousness. And for me, that's where the boogeyman lives, is in those lower states of consciousness, where things can come out of the shadows and go boo, where things can chase me, and I'm trying to get away from them. And if we start looking at things like that, not better or worse, but just these are some clues for me to interpret things, then I can start examining what these things might mean, what my subconscious may be revealing to me through this dream state. So when I'm down low, I need to look at bringing my consciousness up to where I'm out of the realm of fear and upset, and raising my consciousness into trust and faith and knowing that all is well, that there is a power and a presence within me that can supersede and transcend any seeming limitation in my life, that I rock. And as I work on raising my consciousness out of that lower dark state, then my life gets better and better and better. And if I look at other situations in my life, I can look at things that say, let's stay with dreams, because those are good. Do you ever have dreams that you're under the water? You're swimming under the water. Carl Jung says that is our subconscious state, is water, and that anything in the water are ideas of our subconscious. So when we start looking at things like that, saying that fish is an idea in the subconscious mind, what might that mean? Then we can start interpreting what our subconscious is saying to us. But one thing I want to be really clear about, nobody can interpret your life for you. You are the only one that can, because it only means what you make it mean. And it's only real if you make it real. So as you look in your life and you look at the story you're making up about this, then you can decide whether or not that's true for you, or whether or not that's something somebody told you about. Deep breath. Now we go into Bible. The Bible is written in 3 different levels. One is historical, which is suspect to begin with, because the whole 6 days thing doesn't really pan out. Also, the world is not 4,000 years old. And strangely enough, historians are having a lot of trouble finding any record of the Israelites ever having been in Egypt. And it seems that the Egyptians were really good record keepers. And they don't have any record of any of that. Moses, the Red Sea, all of that. It only means what you make it mean. So when we look at the Bible historically, it brings up a lot of stuff. And then other people look at the Bible philosophically. It's an intellectual discussion. And I'm not into that either. The third way is to look at the Bible as a spiritual journey of all of us, that this is our spiritual path in life. And so there's the same story that goes on over and over and over. Did you ever read Matthew, Mark, and Luke? Same thing over and over and over again. Why in the world? It's over and over and over again. Same exact story. That's because it's our spiritual journey. And we want to be able to look at ourselves as we grow spiritually. So there's some clues for looking at this Bible idea. One is that the name means nature. So all of the names of the Bible mean something. And I don't mean just phooey meanings. These are the actual meanings of their Hebrew definition. And so the writers of the Bible were actually saying, well, this grow in consciousness person went to this abundant and prosperity place, and they had a wonderful life. That's actually what their names mean. So you look at the names and you start wondering, what does this name mean? What meaning am I assigning to it? And how am I getting value out of that? What am I going to learn from this and get from this? Another thing that's very good in interpreting these things that I like is numerology. Does anybody like numerology? I'm always about, well, what does that add up to? Is that really the number I want? Oh my God, it's a 6. No, 6s are all about work. No, I don't want to do that. Let's go to a 7 and have happy completion. So you use numerology to see what story they're telling in the Bible. And the Bible was written at levels for the outer people and for the inner learning of people. That's why Jesus said, for they who have ears to hear, that if you can get it, there's a deeper meaning in this. So it's written on two different levels, and we want to go and look at the deeper level of what these stories are. I have notes. Places in the Bible are all about states of consciousness. So when you go and there's a house, it means it's a state of consciousness. If there's a tent, what is that? It's a temporary state of consciousness. That's why when you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you don't want to build a condo. You don't want to establish your consciousness in that environment. You want to move on through. So places are all about states of consciousness. You go high up to the mountaintop. You go to the land in the east, which is all about within. You go to the land of the west, which is all about the outer experiences in life. This is fascinating stuff. Water is all about the fluid movement, the subconscious, and numbers. 7 is perfect completion. 12 is also spiritual completion. I always knew that 12 was a really good power, spiritual power number, and that's used over and over again. So in that, everybody breathe. I want to talk about one of my favorite stories, and that is the Garden of Eden. Now, so many people have used the story of the Garden of Eden as a way to separate us and spirit, as a way to say, mankind, you really screwed up. You ate that apple, and down out of the garden you went to work by the sweat of your brow and to, what craziness is this? Have pain during labor? Really, you want to put that in the Bible? You want to put that on everybody? Come on. So the Garden of Eden has been used in the past to separate us from our spiritual nature. And I want to present it in a really different way. A really different way. The Garden of Eden is in the east. So the Garden of Eden is within us because the east is within. And it's a garden. This is a culture that is in the desert. What does a garden mean to them? It means that there's a lot of tending to the garden. It means that there's water and there's growth. There's lavishness, there's abundance. It's a beautiful place, this Garden of Eden. And that is our original state or our original home. And in that Garden of Eden, as the story goes, there's all kinds of things to eat, to embody, to take in to ourselves. And the main character of that is the tree of life. That experience of oneness, that experience of being connected with life, of having that presence of spirit in us, as us, is us now. And then there is the no-no tree. The no-no tree is the tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Not the fruit of good and evil, the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And what in the world is the knowledge of good and evil? Well, good and evil is not one, it's two. It's duality. It's judgment. And there are different ways to discern. People say, well, Barbara, you tell me not to judge, but my gosh, I got to judge whether the light is red or green. Do you remember back a little bit before this when Adam named all of the animals to evidently show dominion over them? Doesn't really mean that. Doesn't mean we get to rape and pillage the land and hurt all of the animals. That's not what it meant. It meant that there was a discerning naming of nature. Oh, that's a cow. That's a camel. That's a dodo bird. I don't know how long ago it was. That's a fish. That's a bird. It's an ability to discern what's going on without being emotionally caught up in judging it. But when you get to the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you've moved from discernment into judgment. And that's where we get tripped up. So the story goes that there's a serpent, a snake, that whispers into Eve, who is the feminine side of Adam, whispers into her ear that says, hey, baby, this is really, really what you want, that if you eat this fruit, then you will become like God, knowing good and evil. Well, God doesn't know good and evil. God just knows is. God doesn't have the ability to be in judgment or to be separate. God is all that there is. The judgment of good and evil is in us. And so the snake convinces Eve to take the bite, and she goes, hey, Adam, this is really good. And Adam takes the bite. Boom, all is different. Now, what happens the first thing once we move into judgment of the knowledge of good and evil, and we start judging things, usually with a don't you? Don't you? When you go into judgment, it's not like, oh, sweet judgment. No. It's got a real emotional charge to it. Otherwise, it would simply be discernment. So when we go into judgment, we immediately turn it on ourselves. And we see ourselves as naked. More than that, we are ashamed. I think that the damage that has been done to people by viewing their physical body as bad or wrong is huge. The psychological damage that we have of not being okay, talk about being born this way. Look in the mirror, buck naked. I was born this way and I'm good with it. But when we see ourselves with judgment, then we immediately go into shame. And when we go into shame, the first thing that happened was to blame. And so immediately the shame is sowing fig leaves, how ridiculous is that, around the lower portions of the body. And then God is walking through the garden and says, Adam, 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 where are you? Hello. Well, it's a silly story. Remember, this was the way that they taught back then. They taught in story. And remember that these stories were not written down for a long, long time. They were just passed around the campfire and told as a matter of teaching. We've lost the teaching of it. So God is walking around in the garden calling for Adam and finds Adam and says, why didn't you come? And Adam said, well, I was afraid. I was ashamed. So now we have shame, guilt, fear, and now we have blame. And God immediately said, why? What did you do? Did you eat the fruit? I didn't do it. She made me do it. Blame. And Eve says, I didn't do it. Man, it was the snake. Snake meaning a lower state of consciousness, although snakes have taken a bad rap over this. So we immediately go into blaming. And when we go into judgment, shame, guilt, blame, fear, then we are out of the garden. We have kicked ourselves out of the Garden of Eden. We have all of this stuff that is our natural place to be. Our natural state of consciousness has everything that we could possibly desire. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. And we have kicked ourselves out. Now, the good news is that you do not have to stay out of the Garden of Eden. You do not have to labor by the sweat of your brow to get barely enough to eat and all of these awful things. But you know, when we're in judgment, doesn't everything seem harder? Doesn't everything seem like it takes all that we've got to make it through? We're just barely surviving because we're doing that to ourselves because we are in judgment. And the good thing about that is that even though we have kicked ourselves out of the garden, we can go right back in. And we go right back in by stopping our judgment, by stopping eating of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's not good. It's not evil. You don't know what it is. It just is. It's not done yet. It's a cake that's not finished baking yet. We're not done yet. And so to stand in judgment about ourselves or someone else is only going to put us into shame, fear, guilt, and blame. And boom, out we go. And some of us bounce back and forth in and out of the garden many times during the day. You know you do. Because it just looks so wrong. That looks so wrong. Anybody would think that that's wrong. That should not have happened. They should not have done that, especially to me. They shouldn't have done that to me. And so I'm going to make up this whole big story about it. It only means what you make it mean. It's only going to mean to me what I make it mean. And if I choose to go into good and bad and right and wrong and all of that separation, I'm going to kick myself out of the garden. So the real work comes in getting back in. And there's not a door that we can go, knock, 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 excuse me, God. You kicked me out, but I'd like to come back in. I have a ticket. I'd like to pay whatever admission fee there is to come back in. It's not like that. The real work is inside of ourselves, stopping the judgment. The real work is turning inside of ourselves and admitting that we are paying a high price to be eating of this tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. It doesn't even taste good. It is a bitter fruit. It doesn't taste good to go around all judgmental and upset. We want to eat the sweet fruit. We want to have the happy life. We want to have the best day ever, which means we have to stop eating of judgment and stop being in judgment. And there are some people who have left this center and said, Barbara, you just asked too much of me. I just cannot let that be okay. And I'm not saying you've got to bless it and say that this was the best thing that ever happened to me, but we've got to stop condemning it. We've got to stop criticizing it. We've got to stop throwing ourselves out of the garden over it. If something happened to us once, isn't that enough? Do we have to live it over and over and over again? Every week, every month, every day of our lives, do we have to go through that over and over again? Isn't once enough? Can't we let it go? And again, we don't know what value may be in this. We don't know what half-baked cake we may be in relationship with or watching on television or hearing about at a party. The cake is not baked yet. If we can pull our energy back and simply go, I'm not going to fall into that judgment. I'm not going to get hooked into it. I'm not going to turn my emotional state over to this experience. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to keep my power. I'm going to stay in the garden, and I will be happy even if it kills me. If we can get a hold of that, then we can live in the Garden of Eden. We can live in a world where peace and joy and love truly do exist. We can have prosperity and wholeness and joy. If we can get a hold of our habit of eating of that fruit and allow ourselves to stay in a state of grace, in a state of prosperity, in a state of love, and in a state of joy, then we can have the life of our dreams. But we're the ones who keep it from us. We're the ones who pull it from ourselves. We're the ones who throw ourselves out. And then most of us go around all of our lives bemoaning our fate that we've been cast out and now it's going to go to 7 generations, and those are only thoughts. Children are all thoughts. 7 generations of thought it usually does go to unless we pull ourselves out. Getting back in the garden and learning how to live there, I think, is a paramount requirement of everyone on the spiritual path. And you don't have the luxury of going off to a monastery where nobody bothers you. People say, oh, I went to the monastery. Well, bully for you. Nobody bothered you. You got to sit there and chant for 30 days. Okay, I'd like to go chant for 30 days. It's a better quality spiritual growth to live in the world and to be able to bring that into the people in our lives, the people in our neighborhood, and the people in our surroundings. So, if you want to look at things in the Bible, remember, probably none of it's true. Probably. Or is so skewed by the 360 some odd translations that it's gone through that it doesn't hold water on a historical level. But I tell you, there are some opportunities to have deep spiritual growth by looking at stories that have been told for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. How many times have we been enslaved? How many times have we enslaved ourselves? How many times did we have to run and claim our power? That we had to search for that 40 years or 40 days and 40 nights, 40 being the number of internal completion. How many times did we have to really strive to get the good out of the situation. And then the world opens up and we're back in the garden. Interesting story about the Bible. People who did what God, and I know I've said that word a lot today, so breathe with me. People who did what God told them to do always prospered. So if God is always inside of us, where is the kingdom? The Father within doeth the work. If God is always inside of us, then people who relied on that higher wisdom within them always end up prospering. They always end up healed. They always end up prospering. Things always work out. So I want to thank those of you who have stayed in the room when you didn't want to be here, and those of you who enjoyed the story. We're going to have a lot of fun tomorrow night, and I love looking at spirituality from all different angles. It's a good thing to do, and whatever we can use to grow and to thrive and to be better at this thing called life, we should avail ourselves of it. I love you, and so it is.